3 weeks ago, Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager, was shot down by a white neighborhood watchman who claimed self-defense.
Breonna Taylor, the 26-year-old Louisville first responder, shot 8 times and killed by police.
Keisha Wilson!
Keisha Wilson! Ashe!
Keisha Michael!
Keisha Michael! Ashe!
Hold that name in your mind.
The coronavirus has spread to countries across the world, but officials believe that it all started in Wuhan, China. It's believed that the virus may have originated from a market in the city where people can buy an assortment of wild game meat.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
There's new evidence that the virus has had a troubling racial impact. An Associated Press analysis of nearly 3,300 coronavirus patients who died found 42% of them were African American. Blacks only make up about 21% of the total population in that study.
Disturbing video shows a white officer pinning Floyd to the ground by pressing his knee into Mr. Floyd's neck. He's the black man who died after being arrested by Minneapolis police. Demonstrations turned into riots as protesters clashed with police.
Oh boy. We've got two CHP cruisers.
No peace! No peace! No peace! No peace! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
Breaking news with this. While the governor was talking, Public Health Director Barbara Ferrer, Dr. Barbara Ferrer, suggested that LA County's stay-at-home order will likely be extended for the next 3 months. Unless this changes and there is a great treatment option, that it might be safer to keep the kids at home. This is not over.
"2020 has been a year like no other. How will the next generation be shaped by this unprecedented time in American history?"
Racially, I would identify as Asian, and so I have dealt with a few people coughing at me, mocking at me, as well as jokes at school, but I know that a lot of other people have dealt with a lot worse.
On a personal level, I'm the class of 2020, so I had to graduate high school in the middle of a pandemic, which definitely sucked.
Terrifying. I get so afraid whenever I have a sore throat or my head hurts a little bit.
The pandemic is clearly impacting everyone, so how is it impacting our relationships?
I think that the coronavirus has definitely separated some people, but it's also brought some people together, because I think that we've really had a chance to realize who matters most in our lives and what people really matter most in our lives. And I think that all of the other stuff we've really done away with.
Definitely have separated, mainly because people made it really political as well. And sometimes I would get into political fights with people about the pandemic and stuff like that.
I know my family has gotten so much closer because of this, but then if we're talking about the bigger scheme of the country, it's so far apart now, so I don't know.
I feel like it's definitely brought people together, especially our generation. I feel like a lot of people are realizing that they have to do more, and I feel like a lot of young people are realizing I need to go out and vote if I can. I need to and if I can't vote, then I need to show up in the streets. If I can't show up in the streets, I'm calling and emailing representatives. I need to do something. I can't just sit here and not do anything.
The pandemic seems to have narrowed our social circles, as well as fueled and polarized our political engagement. How would you say the pandemic has impacted your community?
If I'm talking about, the Latino community, I think has had it really rough during the pandemic. You know, a lot of people that work blue-collar jobs have had a lot of suffering during the pandemic because they're essential workers like grocery store clerks or housekeepers or people that work in factories. So many people together, like there's bound to be outbreaks of coronavirus.
I think it's impacted my community in a handful of different ways, actually. Like, for some of the people I know that they're dealing with because a lot of people are being evicted right now. And I think that's one of the negative ways it's impacting people because they don't have the space or the capacity to even ask for help because everyone's in need. Everyone needs help. And a lot of people feel guilty for even having to ask for help. So I think that's how it's impacting my community. A lot of people are feeling bad for needing help, and that shouldn't be the case.
My neighborhood community, for example, some of the small businesses have shut down, which is, it's sad, but then at the same time, people are fine. People who, I live in a pretty white, wealthy neighborhood, and people are okay. They have the money to deal with things that they need to deal with.
The economic effects of the pandemic have hit less resourced communities much harder, just like the virus itself. So how has the government done in supporting these communities that are most in need?
I mean, the response was so delayed and pathetic, but at the same time, I think that, I knew our government was going to fail at this. I think they fail at everything, but to me, it's just the way the citizens, the way we as the people treated coronavirus while it was in China, we didn't treat it that seriously.
Nurses, doctors, whoever, they're not protected. Donald Trump, he literally said it was a hoax. So people don't believe it's real. States with these people that care more about the economy than people's health are opening back up, and the curve never even went down.
The government doesn't necessarily have our best interest in mind, and I feel like money comes first, and then they want to care about the people.
In a city like LA, where homelessness is already a huge problem, the pandemic has contributed to more housing insecurity and the likelihood of more people living on the streets. Do you think that masks should be politicized?
I don't think it has to do with politics. I think it more has to do with respect about other people's lives, and empathy, care that people are being sick, care people are dying, care that people are losing their lives and losing their families. It doesn't have to be political, but it can just be empathy. You can have compassion.
What have you learned from the pandemic?
That I know it sounds cheesy, but I've learned that it's okay to be alone and it's not always as boring as it seems.
It's given me more of a time to reflect on my identity and who I am and what I really want to do when I'm older and the path that I'm trying to go down.
I'd say it probably would just make us realize or take advantage of the real of the outside world more. If this is ever over soon in the future, we're gonna probably appreciate it more, because I remember when I was inside for that whole month, I came outside and it was all quiet and there was no cars, and it was very cathartic just to be outside again.
I do think the reflectiveness and just the introspection has really skyrocketed, especially because I feel like a lot of our personality and our self is based off of our peers, and that shifted drastically when we had to be indoors. So it's kind of a lot of self-learning and self-love and reflection.
Whether we like it or not, COVID has impacted us in all facets of life, from our relationships to our communities to our politics. As the pandemic was revealing massive racial inequalities around the country, and people were limited to their workplace and home, the world watched as George Floyd was murdered over an 8-minute span, hearing his last desperate pleas, "I can't breathe."
They're free. This is the art of liberation. And if you have not used your art to help liberate mind and body and soul and spirit, as someone once said, your capoeira is deficient.
So I'm Black American, and in the past couple of months, I feel that I've been able, because with this movement, I've been able to sort of express myself a little bit more and like what my community goes through, just like racism and like things that stem from that.
Yeah, I just feel like it was just kind of like, for a lot of people, it was just like, well, we know it's happening, but I don't think there's really anything we can do. We're young, this and that. Like, people have been fighting for years, there's no justice. So I feel like everybody's been kind of like pushing it off to the side, kind of like, oh, it's not really that like big of a deal because there's so many other things, but it is big, and I feel like it sucks that it took for George Floyd to be killed to bring all these areas of people like stepping up to racism.
Yeah, I think most people were, but I think a lot of people awoke even more after that, because having to sit there and watch those 8 minutes of him not being able to breathe and having to hear him calling for his mom, I think that awoke a lot more people to the fact that this is continuously happening.
People that weren't aware of it before, because you're cooped up inside and you have to be reading the news and certain things, I definitely think it's been a catalyst. And like the idea of everyone was stuck inside and then everyone goes out to protest, like I know a ton of people that went to protest with like feeling the rush of being able to go outside again because they were locked up for coronavirus.
George Floyd's murder was the last straw to a generation weary from racial injustice and the pandemic. A perfect storm unleashed itself as people came together to fight for equality. BLM has sparked conversations about systemic racism in all facets of society, especially education. In addition to learning about the history, our schools need to do a better job of addressing racism today.
I don't think schools currently like teach it enough. I mean, you learn about slavery and then you learn about like Jim Crow laws and like the black codes and stuff like that. But then once it gets to like the war on drugs and then also like redlining, they kind of like skip over that fact, and like racism isn't really talked about in an aspect like relating to the government. It's more just like, oh, people were still kind of racist, but like there's no like discussion of it still like in politics or in like the system of policing.
It's hard to start jumping to those levels before you get to like yourself, you know? I think like that's important, to learn racism within yourself and learn like how you're you know, adding to that problem. So I think schools should do a better job of that rather than just like letting us know, yeah, we were once racist and had slaves, but really that's not true because like we're kind of still doing that, you know? So yeah.
Many students, frustrated with a deficient or whitewashed approach to their education, have turned to social media for a more complete perspective.
We have social media, and social media does like allow you to see different people's experiences and like connect the experiences to show patterns, rather than in the past it was all history book, textbook learning, and based off of like newspapers where people could kind of get their opinion out, but you don't necessarily get to see like comments where it's like, oh, I went through this too. So now it's like, for instance, like everything was individual then. So it's easier for somebody to be like, well, that didn't really happen. That's not true. Like, that's not a real thing. Like, racism in America isn't real. But now it's like you see like the constant pattern, and we kind of like, it's like impossible to avoid now.
Well, personally, social media has played like a really big role in my self-education. I like to, you know, share the posts that teach me to, like, you know, on my story to my friends. I get to find Black businesses to buy from instead.
I really feel right now that we've seen a rise in activism, but we've also seen a rise in performative activism, because there are so many people that were like pressured to be allies towards this movement, because if not, you could be perceived as racist. So at the end of the day, I think that there were a lot of people that just hopped aboard the Black Lives Matter movement to basically protect their reputation.
Good thing and a bad thing, because for one, it, like I said, it helps people unify on a larger basis than, you know, they could if they were in person, especially during the given circumstances, right? But I also think it can be a bad thing because there's a lot of the same stuff on display all the time, you know, and it tends to make people very one-sided as opposed to try to establish some type of dialogue.
While our generation feels this call to action, we look more closely at our current leaders to assess where we are today and what changes we need to make for tomorrow.
Black Lives Matter, BLM. It's really hurting the black community. It's hurting the black community.
Right now, just sort of with all like the chaos going on, I was just thinking about how like our government needs to like maintain law and order, meaning that there's a lot of like buildings being burned, people are stealing, there are innocent black children that are dying every single day and that are being killed and shot, and there's not really any justice for them, and not a lot of people know about it, which really sucks. And there's also like people that are like beating shop owners and, you know, like burning down these small businesses. I feel like there should be justice for these people that lost their jobs and their lives.
They're calling us thugs. They're responding to these protests and the Black Lives Matter movement with more violence. And when we're distinctly protesting because of violence, and I think they've got this like misconception that if they shut us up, we're gonna stop. Like, no, you're giving us more fuel to our fire because you're proving to us that you just don't care. You're proving to us that we can do whatever we want. We can do whatever we possibly think will help, and you're just going to continuously do harm that we're literally fighting against.
If it's me and all my black friends, we're in a car, at that, a nice car, we already know something's gonna happen. We need to roll the windows down, act cool, turn the music down. Like, we don't give any reason for us to get pulled over. It's still like the same issues. Like they're focusing on like getting new cars, but not training police officers to be able to act in situations where they need to remain calm even though they have guns. Like,
we don't need guns. I feel like that's the first step. Like, so I think defunding the police, like, I think take a hella big chunk out of that. Like, get like all the money from like their weapons and shit out of that. Like, police should be able to like be trained mentally. Like, I feel like that's like the biggest thing. Like, and it's like, I'm not sure if we can even do that. So there's other options of like abolishing the police.
As frustration with lawmakers and law enforcement comes to the fore, people take to the streets to make their voices heard.
It was so powerful and just so beautiful to the point where it felt like we were all together. And I think that's, a lot of people think these protests are violent and disordinary, but they're not. They're so not. The uniform and they're just beautiful, and it's community. Like, if you're looking for what community looks like, go to these protests and involve yourself, and you will literally feel what community looks like in that moment. Standing in the street, yelling these chants, and just like standing with people that have the same view as you. It's fucking beautiful, personally.
It was empowering, but also extremely like frightening. Like, I was genuinely afraid for my life because literally the National Guard was, I don't know if you saw the movie theater over there, like the National Guard is there with assault rifles for peaceful protesters.
As we reflect on the tumult of this past year, we turn to the future and to the positive changes that we can make to the troubled world that we will one day inherit.
To be the generation that sparks great social change is first we really need to have people in power who reflect our values.
The conversations are great and that's awesome, but I really do think it's about, you know, telling people to get out there and vote, because the people that are in charge of, you know, the education board in California or just like small local things do affect the grand scheme of things.
The number one thing is like supporting black businesses and small businesses. Like, just in Pasadena, I just feel like we don't really have that support.
Increase connections with like students and the administration at schools, and have open discussions about race, and just instill in this generation that we shouldn't be seeing race in this way.
Like I said, just being educated. I feel like that's really the most important. I feel like a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people fear the unknown, And, you know, ignorance is a thing that a lot of people also have, and it's not really their fault, they just don't know. You know, a lot of people aren't exposed to black people really, and they just take what they hear.
There's no way that we can move forward if we remain this divided, you know? We have to move forward together, and that's something that's missing today in our government, that's a major thing we can do.
Between voting locally and nationally, supporting black businesses, educating students about race, and communicating, young people have ideas about what comes next.
I've seen how much work can be accomplished within just like a small amount of time. And that's personally made me way more motivated to serve in government. That's made me way more motivated to like really talk to people and start conversations about like social and racial justice.
I do expect to see change. I don't know when that's gonna happen, but I definitely expect it, and I think a lot of people need to stop being afraid of change for it to happen. I think they need to stop feeling so comfortable in how things are right now, because right now is not okay. The way things are right now in this world is not okay. And I think when they realize that we can change these things without changing the whole freaking world, but also change the whole freaking world, because these things are painful. These things are harmful, and these things are killing people.
I no longer can be silent yet hold others accountable for racism. And I think we're at a point in terms of Black Lives Matter and just overall what we're seeing going on that this is no longer white versus black. It's no longer the people versus the police. This is truly just good versus evil.
We're engaged, we're motivated, and there is no more room for apathy.
I feel like it's really hard to touch with my emotions as far as like what I feel. Because like I said, when it comes to like me going on social media or me like turning on my TV and just seeing another name and another face, it's just like I've become so numb to like feeling hurt that someone's like out there, because it just seems like it's happened again and again and again. I don't know, it's just like a question in my mind of like, when is this ever going to be done? And is this ever going to be done?
Do you have hope in our generation?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I do have hope.
I have hope in our generation.
Yes, of course, I have a hope in our generation.
I do, because we're fed up.
Oh yeah, our generation is badass. Like, I don't care what nobody says. We're gonna do exactly what we need to do to survive. And we can literally say that our generation is doing the damn thing. Like, I don't care what nobody says. They can't take that from us. We are doing the damn thing. And I will